set eyes on this beautiful mountain lake was in June of 1986. Little did I know at that time that I would raise my family and birth a ministry in the town of San Cristóbal that sprawls out in the valley surrounding the lake. 3 months later, I rented a small house which truly became a home after our wedding in May of 1988. I was thrilled to bring Tanya home to that little house and to introduce her to all the village churches that had sprung up.
After 5 years of Michael wearing out tennis shoes on the mountain trails and passing out thousands of tracts and going to the most remotest parts of our state, the Lord began to move on our hearts. We had seen many people come to the Lord. Men and women had been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ, but they were lacking a stability that we longed to see. After nearly 8 years of ministry, as Mike took inventory of his life's work, he was disappointed.
I'll never forget one night as I was coming home from a service in a distant village. It was about 9 p.m. and I was alone on my motorcycle on a mountain road going through village after village. I began to commune with the Lord in my spirit, and the conversation went something like this. Lord, I have been praying for these villages for years now. I have asked you to move on the hearts of the people. I have been faithful in passing out tracts and witnessing. When are you going to help me reach these people? Boy, was I self-righteous. I never even considered that he had given his life for these people almost 2,000 years ago and had been patiently waiting for someone to come and bring them the gospel message. Here I was, 3 or 4 years later, complaining because things weren't moving as fast as I would have liked to see them move. Out of the darkness of that jungle came that still, small voice, booming like thunder. And this is what I heard. Yes, Michael, you have been asking me to help you reach these people. You have asked me to help you with your program and with your ministry. You have asked me to help you accomplish your plan. When are you going to consult me as to what my will is for this area? When are you going to offer to help me with my plan? Needless to say, I was broken. I wept the rest of the way home. Oh, God, forgive my ignorance, my self-righteousness, my high-mindedness. Please show me your plan for this area and the part you wish us to have in it. I remember well the day that the Lord laid it upon my heart to write down the 9 fruits of the Spirit on index cards and write out their definitions. I felt compelled to begin going over them until they became a part of my being. We were excited. We figured that in a short amount of time we would begin walking in the fruits of the Spirit. Fruit number 1, love. That shouldn't be a problem. We were raised as Christians. We had left everything to go to the mission field. Love? We were motivated by love. We were living examples of love. We preached love on a regular basis. And then the Lord enrolled us in His school of love.
When Michael first came to Guatemala, he began to invest his time and his money and all his efforts into the family that lived across the street. They had 10 children. And then when I came to Guatemala, I began to do the same. And that's when we realized that they were stealing clothes off of our clothesline and taking things from us. And it was that time when we realized that we had reached a crisis in our life, trying to love this family that was just not appreciating anything that we were doing for them.
I remember, as a young man, I purchased a poster. It was a picture of a waterfall flowing down into a beautiful, beautiful, quiet pool. The caption on the poster said, "Lord, fill me with your love." I took that poster with me everywhere, no matter where I moved to, and hung it on my wall in my bedroom. I don't recall a day going by, not one single day, that I didn't pray that prayer and say, "God, fill me with your love." For the first time in my life, I realized I was an empty pool. But the Lord helped me. My heart started to fill with love for them and for others that I had problems with. 8 years later, I thought I had finally learned to love. 8 years, not 8 days. And then came the test. You know, every course has its exams. Well, it was time for finals. It was Tuesday morning, the Tuesday prior to Easter Sunday in 1994. My family and I used to live in this house. That morning we had got up early in the morning and we had spent a wonderful time in prayer and just enjoying breakfast together. And around 11 o'clock I decided to go out and check on the construction of the Bible school and the church installations. As I was backing out of the driveway, I noticed a crowd of people about a block away up the street. I stopped the truck, got out and waited as the crowd made its way toward our house. They were hollering and all worked up about something. As they got nearer, I realized they were yelling, "Burn her, burn her, burn her." I noticed an American lady in the midst of the crowd, accompanied by a single town constable. He made his way towards me and asked me to please come and translate for them. The lady couldn't speak any Spanish, and so I agreed to go along. I had just received the test paper, and it was time to turn it over and start filling in the blanks. They brought her over here to the courthouse, which is what you can see, and they took her inside and they began to question her. Her name was June Weinstock. She was 53 years old and was a tourist in Guatemala. Someone started the rumor that she was stealing babies for body parts to ship back to the States. That may sound absurd, but to these uneducated Mayan Indians, it is very plausible. About 5 hours later, the mob had set fire to the courthouse, attacked the National Police along with the volunteer fire department, beaten me to a bloody pulp, and turned June Weinstock into a living vegetable, caving in her skull in 3 different places. As I clung to the fence that day, trying to escape from those who were beating on me on the other side, and jumped down to this side, I just literally jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, and there were people here waiting to club me. I fell onto the ground and just covered my head, and they just continued to beat me. As the police tried to get me out of town and away from the mob, others were still trying to get at me with wooden and steel clubs. They broke out one of the windows of the vehicle in which I was whisked out of town and away from danger. My family was left in the middle of it, and the crowd was screaming that they were going to burn my house and my family. I was in handcuffs and helpless. The police thought the handcuffs would help calm down the mob. As we left town, there were 2 truckloads of soldiers in full riot gear coming into town. Seated there in the truck, with blood streaming down my face from a wound on my head, I thought, I hope they get out of the trucks and empty their machine guns into the crowd. I hope they kill them all. They are animals. They have no respect for authority, for life, for God, or anything. They deserve to die. It was then that God graded my paper. I received a big fat 0. I had failed miserably, and I knew it. The Lord showed me the blackest heart I had ever seen before in my life and ever care to see again. And it wasn't in the bodies of those that had performed the atrocities, but in the body of the young missionary, Michael Lewis. I cried out, "Lord, how could you forgive?" He said to me, "What if I have a Saul of Tarsus in the crowd you just murdered in your heart?" I had failed, and I knew it, but I couldn't forgive. I had given 8 years of my life to this town, and this was how they repaid me? A short while later, I was lying on the x-ray machine at a local clinic. They told me that my wife and children had arrived, along with Boris Ramirez, a Wycliffe Bible translator. I was so thankful. Boris sent a note down asking if I needed anything or if there was anything he could do. I remember lying there and asked for a pen, and I wrote on that paper, "Please pray that we would be filled with love for the church. We lack so much." And then I began to weep. The next day, a friend came up in a small airplane and flew us to Guatemala City. Now came the dilemma. What do we do? God sent us to San Cristóbal, and we had always enjoyed being there and serving Him. But now, we didn't have a desire to return. Up until this point, it had been relatively easy to live in San Cristóbal. Now we were afraid. How could we say no to the Lord, and yet we couldn't bring ourselves to say yes? There was no way we could forgive. On the third day, I eased my way out of bed. I was bruised from head to toe. By this time, I was getting pretty stiff. I made my way into a little room they had there and have a piano. And as I sat before the Lord that morning, I was broken. I cried out to God and I said, "Father, I can't forgive those people. I don't have it in me. I can't love them. I can't go back." You see, I had been weighed in the balance, and I was found empty. The pool of love inside of me was empty. All that was there was wretchedness, nakedness, blindness. I was in desperate need of some gold tried in a fire. I needed white raiment. I needed eye salve applied to my eyes. And you know, there's only one place. There is only one place that we can attain and reach and receive those things. And as I sat before Him, that one place, my prayer began to change that morning. And I said, "God, I can't forgive, but You can." I said, "God, I can't love, but You can." I said, "God, I can't go back, but You can." And that morning, as I sat there before Him, I literally felt His presence flow into me like I was an empty vessel. I felt it filling up every pore and fiber of my being, filling me with His love. It was no longer my love, but it was His love. About a week later, my wife and I sat there in Guatemala City. She looked at me and she said, "Michael, you've got to help me." I had been talking about going back to San Cristóbal. She said, "I can't. You've got to help me." I remember that night sitting on the couch, I put my arms around her and I began to pray. "God, please give us victory." You see, God had never told us to leave San Cristóbal. He had told us to go, but He had never told us to leave. We didn't have it in us to say yes, nor could we say no to the will of the Father. And that night, as we sat there on the couch crying out for God's mercy, He met with us and began to fill my wife with that love. A week later, we headed back. We came back to our home. Oh, don't get me wrong. We had some fear to overcome. But perfect love casteth out all fear. That day was the turning point in our ministry. Doors that were closed began to open. Since that day in 1994, we have seen God move in marvelous ways. All the time I thought the Lord needed to do a work in others, when what He really needed was to do a work in us. Once He was able to bring about a little bit of Christ-likeness in the messengers, we were then ready to give birth to some Christ-likeness in others.